They say that time heals all wounds, but I do not think that is completely true. Some wounds do not heal, they just stop bleeding. They become a quiet part of who you are, a heavy shadow that walks beside you in the empty rooms of your house. For 40 years, I believed I knew everything there was to know about my family. I believed I knew my sister, Martha, better than I knew my own reflection in the mirror. We shared everything from a tiny bedroom with mismatched wallpaper to the deepest, most quiet dreams of our youth. But it turns out, the person you stand closest to can be the one holding the biggest mystery. When Martha passed away on a rainy Tuesday morning last autumn, she did not leave behind a long speech or a dramatic letter. She left behind a small, rusted iron key hidden inside an old, velvet-lined jewelry box that smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. That key did not belong to any door in our house, nor did it fit the lock of any drawer we had ever shared. It was a key to a life I never knew she lived, a secret she carried like a heavy stone in her heart until her very last breath. When I finally found what that key opened, my entire world did not just shake, it completely shifted. I remember sitting on the edge of her unmade bed, holding that cold piece of metal in my hand, while the rain tapped softly against the glass. The house was so quiet that I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock down the hallway. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if I was strong enough to uncover the truth. My name is Eleanor, and if you have a few moments, I want to tell you a story about love, sacrifice, and the silent burdens we carry for the people we cannot bear to see get hurt. It is a story that taught me that sometimes, the greatest acts of love are the ones that are never spoken out loud. It taught me that forgiveness is not something you give to others because they ask for it, but something you find in your own heart when you finally understand their pain. I used to think that secrets were malicious things, meant to deceive and divide us. But Martha's secret was different. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking shield that she held up to protect the very foundation of our family, even when it meant she had to stand alone in the dark. To truly understand the secret Martha kept, you have to understand how we grew up. We lived in a small, sleepy town where everyone knew your name, your business, and what you had for dinner the night before. Our house was a modest, two-story white building with a porch that creaked whenever the wind blew too hard. Our father was a hard-working carpenter, a man of few words whose hands were always rough from wood shavings and calluses. Our mother was a gentle soul who spent her days tending to her rose garden and baking bread that made the whole neighborhood smell like heaven. Martha was 2 years older than me. From the very beginning, she was the protective shield I always relied on. When we were children and the summer storms would rumble across the valley, making the windows rattle and the lights flicker, she would climb into my narrow bed. She would wrap her long arms around me and whisper, "Don't worry, Ellie. The thunder is just the sky clearing its throat. It can't hurt us in here." She was always the brave one, the one who faced the world with her chin held high, while I was content to hide quietly in her shadow. As we grew into young women, our bond only deepened. We didn't need words to communicate, a simple look across the dinner table was enough for us to know exactly what the other was thinking. Martha was beautiful in a very natural, effortless way. She had dark, wavy hair that she often tied back with a simple blue ribbon, and eyes that seemed to see right through people. But despite her beauty, she never sought the attention of the local boys. She seemed content with our quiet life, helping our mother around the house and assisting our father with his bookkeeping. I, on the other hand, was a dreamer. I fell in love early with a kind-hearted man named Thomas, who worked at the town bank. Thomas was gentle, patient, and loved me with a quiet devotion that made me feel safe. When Thomas asked for my hand in marriage, the whole family celebrated. I remember the night we announced it, our mother cried tears of pure joy, and our father gave Thomas a firm, approving handshake. But when I looked over at Martha, she had a strange, faraway look in her eyes. It lasted for just a fleeting second before she smiled warmly, rushed over, and hugged me tight. "I am so incredibly happy for you, Ellie," she had whispered into my ear. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling slightly. At the time, I thought it was just the excitement of the moment, the natural emotion of seeing her little sister grow up and prepare to leave the nest. I never stopped to think that there might be another reason for her trembling hands. Thomas and I built a small, cozy home just a few miles down the road from the family house. Life moved forward in that beautiful, predictable rhythm of a small town. We had a son named Julian, who brought immense light and laughter into our lives. Martha became the doting aunt who never missed a birthday, a school play, or a Sunday dinner. She chose to remain unmarried, staying in the old family home to care for our parents as they grew frail and elderly. Whenever I asked her if she ever felt lonely or if she wanted to find someone to share her life with, she would simply shake her head and smile. "My life is full enough with you, Julian, and the parents, Ellie," she would say, her fingers gently knitting a sweater for my son. "Some people are meant to build their own nests, and others are meant to help keep the main nest warm. I like my quiet life." And I believed her. I truly did. It was easy to believe her because it comforted me to think that she was perfectly happy exactly where she was. We are often blind to the sacrifices of others when those sacrifices make our own lives seamless and comfortable. The years moved like water under a bridge, quiet and unstoppable. Our parents passed away within a year of each other, leaving Martha alone in the big family house. I worried about her living there by herself, but she insisted she was fine. She took up a job at the local library, spending her days surrounded by old books and quiet whispers. She became even more reserved, turning inward, though her love for my son Julian never wavered. Julian adored her. She was the aunt who listened to his teenage ramblings without judgment and always had a tin of homemade cookies waiting for him. But as Julian grew older and prepared to head off to a distant university, a subtle shift began to happen in our family dynamic. Thomas, my husband, started spending longer hours at the bank. He became distant, his mind always seeming to be miles away even when we sat across from each other at the dinner table. When I spoke to him, he would give short, distracted answers. I brushed it off as stress from his job or the natural anxiety of watching our only child leave home. We all handle change differently, I told myself. One evening, Martha came over for our usual Friday night dinner. The air in the dining room felt heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that had been building between Thomas and me for months. Throughout the meal, I noticed Martha watching Thomas with a sharp, intense scrutiny that was uncharacteristic of her. Every time Thomas spoke or reached for the water pitcher, Martha's eyes followed his movements with a strange, guarded look. It wasn't anger, it was something closer to profound sadness mixed with a quiet vigilance. "Is everything all right at the bank, Thomas?" Martha asked quietly, breaking the long silence that had settled over the table. Thomas blinked, startled by her direct question. He set his fork down, his knuckles turning slightly white. "Yes, Martha. It's just the usual end-of-year accounting. It takes a lot out of me." "I see," Martha replied, her voice dropping to a gentle but firm tone. "Just make sure you don't take on more than you can carry. Some debts are too expensive to pay back." I looked between the two of them, feeling a sudden chill in the room. "What a strange thing to say, Martha," I said, trying to laugh it off. "Thomas is just working hard for our future." Martha didn't look at me, she kept her eyes fixed on Thomas until he lowered his gaze, unable to match her stare. That was the first time I felt a cold prickle of unease in my chest, a faint whisper that something was deeply wrong beneath the surface of my peaceful life. A few weeks later, I went to the library to surprise Martha for lunch. The library was mostly empty, the long wooden tables reflecting the dim light of the lamps. As I walked down the aisle toward her back office, I heard voices. They were hushed, urgent whispers that stopped me in my tracks. "You can't keep doing this," I heard Martha say, her voice trembling but fierce. "She doesn't deserve this. If you don't find a way to fix it, I will." "You don't understand, Martha," a man's voice replied, sounding desperate and defeated. "It's not that simple. If the truth comes out now, it destroys everything. For everyone." My breath caught in my throat. The man's voice belonged to Thomas. I stood frozen behind a row of tall fiction books, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Why was my husband meeting my sister in secret at the library? What truth were they talking about? Before I could find the courage to step forward and confront them, I heard the heavy back door of the library click shut. Thomas had left. When I walked into Martha's office a moment later, she was sitting at her desk, her face buried in her hands. When she looked up and saw me, she gasped, quickly wiping a tear from her cheek. She tried to smile, to put on that brave, protective face she had worn since we were children. "Ellie. You startled me," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "What brings you here?" "I came to see if you wanted to get some lunch," I said, my voice sounding flat, foreign to my own ears. I looked around the empty office, then directly into her eyes. "Was that Thomas the first heard in here?" Martha's face went completely pale. She hesitated for a long, agonizing moment before shaking her head. "No, sweetie. That was just one of the library trustees asking about the budget. I think you must have misheard. She lied to me." My sister, who had never kept a single thing from me, looked me straight in the eyes and lied. A wall of ice instantly formed between us in that moment. I didn't push her, I didn't demand answers. Fear makes cowards of us all, and I was terrified of what the truth might be. I chose to believe her lie because the alternative, that my husband and my sister were sharing a secret life behind my back, was too painful to bear. The distance between Martha and me grew into a wide, silent canyon over the next year. We still spoke, we still had our family dinners, but the warmth was gone. It was replaced by a polite, fragile courtesy that felt like walking on thin ice. I stopped visiting her without warning, and she stopped looking at me with that deep, knowing affection. I grew resentful, convinced that a betrayal was happening right under my nose. I watched Thomas constantly, searching his pockets, checking his phone, looking for any sign of an affair. But I found nothing. There were no hidden love letters, no unexplained expenses, just a profound, exhausting sadness that seemed to consume him. And then, Martha got sick. It happened quickly, aggressive illness that withered her strong body in a matter of months. The brave sister who had always protected me was suddenly small, frail, and confined to a hospital bed set up in her living room. Despite my lingering resentment, my love for her compelled me to be there. I became her primary caregiver, coming over every day to bathe her, feed her small spoonfuls of broth, and adjust her blankets. Even as she faced the end of her life, Martha remained stubbornly silent about the past. She would look at me with eyes full of a deep, unspeakable longing, as if there was a mountain of words she wanted to say but couldn't find the breath to carry them. Thomas rarely came to visit her, and when he did, he stood by the doorway, looking pale and broken, unable to step close to her bed. The tension between them was still there, but it had transformed into a mutual, heavy grief. One evening, when the shadows were long and the house was entirely still, Martha reached out and took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so weak. She looked at me with an intensity that frightened me. "Ellie," she whispered, her voice rough and dry. "When I am gone, you will find a key in my velvet box. It opens an old metal trunk in the attic of the family home. Promise me you will look inside only when you are ready to understand." "Understand what, Martha?" I asked, tears finally spilling over my eyelids. "Why have you been so distant? What have you been hiding from me?" She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and running down her wrinkled cheek. "I did it to keep the storm away from you, Ellie. Just like when we were kids. I always wanted to keep you safe from the thunder." Those were the last meaningful words she spoke to me. 2 days later, Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep, carrying her secret into the quiet earth. After the funeral, the house felt entirely empty, a hollow shell of memories. Thomas withdrew into a shell of complete silence, spending his evenings sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. The weight of the unspoken truth was tearing our marriage apart, even though Martha was no longer there. I knew I couldn't live in the dark any longer. The uncertainty was a poison that was slowly killing whatever love we had left. I drove over to the old family house, the key heavy in my coat pocket. The house smelled of dust, old paper, and the fading scent of Martha's lavender perfume. I climbed the creaking stairs to the dark attic, my heart pounding loudly in the silence. The attic was filled with the remnants of our childhood, old school books, broken toys, and furniture covered in white sheets. In the farthest corner, half hidden behind an old wardrobe, sat a heavy, black metal trunk. My hands shook so badly that it took me 3 tries to get the key into the lock. When it finally turned with a loud, metallic click, a cold wave of dread washed over me. I lifted the heavy lid. I expected to find love letters between my husband and my sister. I expected to find proof of a betrayal that would justify all the anger and resentment I had harbored for months. Instead, what I found broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, but not for the reason I had imagined. At the top of the trunk lay a thick manila folder filled with financial documents, bank statements, and legal letters. Nestled beside the folder was a stack of letters written in Martha's elegant, neat handwriting, addressed to a loan company. I opened the folder first, my eyes scanning the official documents. As I read the words and numbers on those pages, the true horror of the situation unfolded before me. Thomas had not been having an affair with Martha. Years ago, when our son Julian was a teenager and wanted to go to that expensive university, Thomas had made a catastrophic financial mistake. In a desperate attempt to afford the tuition and keep up the illusion of our comfortable life, he had taken out a massive, predatory loan using our family home as collateral. The bank found out, and he was on the verge of losing his job, facing public disgrace, and losing our house entirely. He was facing total ruin. Thomas had gone to Martha in his darkest hour, completely broken, contemplating ending his own life to escape the shame and protect us with his insurance policy. And Martha, my quiet, protective sister, had stepped into the path of the oncoming train to save him. To save us. Martha had quietly sold her shares of the family land, liquidated her modest retirement savings, and signed over the deed of the family house to pay off Thomas's massive debt and stop the legal proceedings against him. She had used every single penny she had to purchase his debt, effectively becoming his creditor so the bank would not prosecute him or seize our home. But there was a catch, a terrible, agonizing catch. The predatory loan company had already initiated an investigation, and the only way to legally stop the public scandal and save Thomas's career at the bank was for someone to take the blame for a major accounting error that had occurred during the transactions. Martha had used her clean reputation and her position to quietly absorb the blame, letting the town believe she had made a massive, negligent mistake with a local charity trust she managed. She had allowed her own name to be quietly tarnished among the town elite, choosing to live a lonely, reclusive life, wrapped in the judgment of others, just to keep Thomas out of prison and to keep me from finding out that our entire life was built on a foundation of financial ruin. I picked up one of Martha's personal journals that lay at the bottom of the trunk. The pages were yellowed, the ink slightly faded. I turned to an entry dated around the time I had overheard them whispering in the library. Thomas came to see me today at the library. He is drowning in guilt. He looks at Ellie every day and feels like a ghost, a liar. He wanted to confess everything to her, to tell her about the money, the debt, and what I did to fix it. But I stopped him. I had to stop him. Ellie is so fragile right now, so full of joy watching Julian succeed at university. If she finds out that their security was bought with my life savings, and that her husband almost destroyed them, it will shatter her heart into pieces. She will look at Thomas with fear instead of love. She will look at this house as a cage instead of a home. Let her think badly of me if she must. Let her think I am distant or strange. I have always been the one to shield her from the storm. I can carry this weight for her. I just pray that one day, when the air is clear, she will forgive me for the silence. The journal dropped from my hands onto the dusty floor. I sat there in the dim light of the attic, sobbing until my chest ached and my throat was completely dry. All those months of anger, all that toxic resentment that had poisoned my heart, evaporated into nothingness, replaced by a profound, overwhelming wave of grief and awe. My sister had not betrayed me. She had loved me with a fierce, unconditional devotion that defied understanding. She had sacrificed her financial security, her reputation, her peace of mind, and her relationship with me, just to ensure that I could sleep soundly at night, wrapped in the comfort of a happy marriage and a secure home. She had allowed me to hold a grudge against her, accepting my cold shoulder and my distant looks as the price she had to pay to keep my world from shattering. I packed the documents and the journal back into the trunk, locked it, and took the key with me. I drove home in a daze, the tears blurring my vision of the familiar roads. When I walked through the front door of my house, the house that Martha had saved for me, I found Thomas sitting at the kitchen table. A single lamp was turned on, casting long, tired shadows across his worn face. He looked up at me, his eyes red and hollow, seeing the tear stains on my face and the small velvet box held tightly in my hands. He knew immediately where I had been. He didn't try to make excuses. He didn't try to lie. He simply lowered his head onto his arms and began to weep, a deep, guttural sound of a man who had been carrying a suffocating secret for far too long. "I am so sorry, Ellie," he choked out between his sobs. "I am so sorry. I ruined everything. I let Martha destroy her life to save mine, and I couldn't even look her in the eye when she was dying. I am a coward." I walked over to him, my own tears falling freely. I did not scream at him, I did not demand to know how he could have been so foolish with our finances. The time for anger had long passed, washed away by the immense sacrifice of my sister. I sat down beside him, wrapped my arms around his shaking shoulders, and pulled him close to my chest. "I know, Thomas," I whispered softly, kissing the top of his graying head. "I know everything now. And we are going to get through this. Together." Forgiveness is a strange and beautiful thing. It does not erase the mistakes of the past, nor does it undo the damage that has been done. But it changes the weight of the burden. That night, the thick wall of ice that had separated Thomas and me for years completely melted away. We sat at that kitchen table until the early hours of the morning, talking openly and honestly for the first time in a decade. He told me everything, the desperation, the panic, the overwhelming shame that had driven him to the brink of despair, and the fierce, uncompromising grace that Martha had extended to him. We cried for our lost years, we cried for the pain we had inflicted on each other through our silence, but most of all, we cried for Martha. We resolved to spend the rest of our lives honoring her sacrifice by protecting the family she had given everything to save. It has been a year since that fateful night in the attic. Thomas and I sold our larger home and moved back into the old family house, the house that Martha loved so dearly. We have spent the past months repairing the creaking porch, painting the weathered walls, and restoring Martha's beloved rose garden to its former glory. The house no longer feels heavy or haunted by secrets, instead, it feels filled with a quiet, enduring warmth, as if Martha's spirit is finally at peace, knowing that the truth has brought us closer together rather than tearing us apart. Julian graduated from university and is now building a successful life of his own. He knows the truth now, too. We sat him down and explained the immense gift his Aunt Martha had given all of us. It has taught him, and all of us, a profound lesson about what family truly means. Every Friday afternoon, I walk down to the quiet cemetery at the edge of town. I place a fresh bouquet of pink roses from her garden onto her smooth headstone. I sit on the grass beside her grave, the warm sun on my back, and I talk to her just like we used to do when we were girls sharing that tiny bedroom with mismatched wallpaper. I don't look back on her silence with anger or regret anymore. I look back on it with a profound, humbling gratitude. I realize now that Martha's secret was never a betrayal, it was the ultimate expression of her love. She stood in the pouring rain so that I could walk in the sunshine. She carried the heavy stone so that my heart could remain light. Life is fragile, and the people we love are often fighting battles we know absolutely nothing about. If there is one thing I have learned from my sister's beautiful, heartbreaking life, it is this: do not wait until someone is gone to try to understand their silence. Look past the rough edges, look past the distance, and look past the words they cannot say. Sometimes, the people who seem the most distant are the ones who are standing right at the door, holding it shut with all their might, just to keep the storm from reaching you.